Hello everybody! I'm here to read you another story, and this time we have another author. His name is Tom. Tom's written a story called The Legendary Mysterious Temple, and this story was inspired by the photograph that you all wrote your setting description on last week as part of your tourism project. Tom decided to take his setting description one step further and actually write the full story. And he wrote this in about an hour and a half, so here goes. The Legendary Mysterious Temple by Tom Osborne. One day, 3 people named Joe, Dan and Zach were just walking until they saw dark forest. "Should we be going here?" asked Zach. Dan said, "Yes, I think the temple's here." "Yep, I know it's in there. Let's just go in and look for the temple while we still can," said Joe. Following what he said, they all ran into the forest. It was extremely spooky. The trees were huge. The logs were as dark as charcoal. The grass felt like thick mud. The leaves were as green as their undersides. No one could see the sky anymore. Zach screamed in horror and tried to run back to where they'd entered, but he could only see more trees. "Why is this endless?" shouted Zach. "It's like a black hole, Zach. When you go in, you're not coming out," said Joe. "No, the temple's here," said Dan. Suddenly, a roar came out of nowhere. Zach dived behind a tree and grabbed onto it, but it felt as sharp as a cactus. "That must be the infinity dragon," said Dan. This made Zach brave enough to come out, but he had massive cuts on his hand, leaving a red puddle on the ground. "The temple's directly in front of us. Follow me," said Joe. After walking to the end of the forest, they found the temple. They could hear fire crackling. The temple was covered in moss, and when Zach touched it, it felt thicker than it was. "Careful, this is dangerous," said Dan. He hit a boulder in the wall and it blew up, making a door. They walked in, but they were wet. There were wet pillars everywhere. In between them, there were dark passageways. Dan picked a random one and they ran through. When they got to the end, Joe noticed a door almost completely blended into the wall. It was extremely cracked and mossy. There was a big pebble attached to it. Dan thought it was the knob, so he opened the door. Inside, there was a pitch black void with only a single boulder which was floating. Dan and Joe stepped in, but when Zach did, the boulder fell. Everyone screamed, thinking they would fall too. Thankfully, they were wrong. Instead, a floor appeared, and then walls. "Phew," said Zach in relief. They heard a roar, the exact same roar they had heard in the forest. This made lava appear on the floor. Zach thought this was the end, but Dan jumped up onto the side of the cave. He helped the others up too, but when all of them were safe, they heard the roar again, and the lava rose higher. "This is more dangerous than I thought it would be," said Dan. "Are we going to make it out of here?" asked Zach. They heard the roar again, but this time the lava rose much higher. Zach started to run, but he was slipping, falling backwards into the lava. Desperately, Dan caught him and pulled him back onto the rock. Zach thought, "This is the last thing we will see." But Dan and Joe jumped from rock to escape, so Zach followed them. At the end of the cave, cracks appeared in the wall and it burst open. "This must be the way out," said Dan. When they all got through the hole, they found a massive pit filled with only grass and a metal wall. Suddenly, a fog cloud blew in front of them, and they couldn't see anymore. When it cleared, they could see the infinity dragon. But the bad news was, it was a stone statue. "Who did this?" yelled Dan. Another dragon flew out from behind the wall. This one was dark red, had an orange chest, a blue circle on its chest, and was much, much bigger than the infinity dragon. "Not the evil dragon!" shouted Dan. Joe started hitting its leg, but the evil dragon kicked him away and stepped on Zach. His eye was bruised and his arm almost broken. After he got up, Dan told him he had to find some moss on the grass. Zach looked everywhere, but he couldn't see any. He was about to give up, but he found some and told Dan. Dan hit the moss, but then both of them heard a terrible scream. They ran to the evil dragon and realised that it was dying. A ball of blue light enveloped it. When it faded, the evil dragon ghost floated away. just when no one could see it anymore, beams of light erupted from the Infinity Dragon statue. Soon it exploded with a ball of blinding light. And when it faded, in place of the statue, the Infinity Dragon was there, in the flesh. It was green, with a yellow chest and huge wings and blood-red eyes, with a red infinity symbol on its back. Because the temple was too much, even for Dan, they got on the Infinity Dragon's back, and it flew away. They got off in front of the forest, and the Infinity Dragon flew back to the temple. Joe, Dan and Zach went on many more adventures, but they never went on the legendary adventure again.